Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and this is the Legacy Files again. My partner and co-author Desta Barnaby is joining me, and we have an exciting new presentation to do. I put this presentation together in a couple of days, and it's about we've got the BUGA Ball, but as I'll describe in the episode, in 1975 there was a 1974 there was another ball found, and it was called the Betz Ball. So I'm going to talk about that a bit today because I knew about it back at the time, and I'm going to go through the history of these orbs, these balls, and I'll show you that this goes all the way back to almost the very beginning of the UFO, modern UFO era. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I can share. Oh, send request. Hang on. Send request to Desta. How you doing, Desta?
I'm good. I forgot I was the person here. Okay, I think you're
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, good.
Okay, can I share now?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to make sure I remember to do the sound because I've got sound on this one. Share sound.
Oh, yeah.
Optimize for video sharing. Share Windows, Zoom Windows. What is that? I don't know. And we'll do that. Whatever. Okay, share. So this is okay, sharing screen. And let's see. So let's go to this. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen, Desta? Hello.
Sorry. Yeah, I turned my audio off. Yes, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the related to the Booga Ball, and Desta has posted, or we've already done two videos. The first one is up on my White House UFO YouTube site. And this is an interview we did with Paula Harris. And she was at the news conference that was held in Mexico City dealing with the Buga Ball that was found in Colombia. So we did an interview with Paula Harris, and that is up. And the second interview we did is also up, and that was the interview we did with Jaime Maussan, who is the person who's now in control of the ball and is doing research and goes through how he got the ball, what the ball is reported to be able to do, and the extreme security that he has protecting the ball. So that is up there as well. And this is the third part of it, where I'm going to go through the history of these type of balls. This is not the first time these balls have been around. Again, we went through Paula Harris, and she's been involved in a number of big cases. The most important ones are the Mission Rama 2014, 2015 Zendra events. This is her and me. She's actually pointing to the tree that the alien was standing. That's you can see the tree there. That's how close these seven witnesses were. These are the people that were involved, except for the businessman on the top right. He was sitting outside the event watching it from maybe a couple 100 yards back as these people all went into the Zendra. This is Ricardo Gonzalez, who is the Mission Rama person that was in charge of the event, the 2014, 2015, and his wife. This is the Booga Ball. You can see it has these very sort of simple, almost like childlike script stuff on it. And uh, um, Jaime Maussan actually goes into describing the fact that they realize this and they give explanations for this. But they're going to talk about all the stuff they're doing, the tests they're doing, Steven Greer's involvement, Danny Sheehan's involvement, and the U.S. House of Representatives had somebody there who was actually at this news conference, and we asked Jaime what this guy had to say. Here's Jaime looking at the ball. They have a little thing that looks down those little holes and the fiber optics. So apparently Stephen Greer has gotten a little sample of this fiber optics. He brought in two scientists from NASA, and they are working on the ball as well for analysis. Here it is. You can see the script type writing on it. This ball was photographed flying around in Colombia. There's, I think, 2 videos. And then Jaime describes how he took it from there and now has the ball for analysis and has spent on between this and the mummies, he said, between $500,000 and $1 million. These are some of the people working on the ball. This is the guy that moved the ball gave it to Jaime. And Jaime describes how he moved the ball from Colombia. It's an interesting story to Mexico City. Here's the news conference. There's Paul at the news conference. This was last weekend, I believe. And this is the ball with Paula. Here they are examining the ball again. Now we go back in this ball, actually, these kind of events go actually back to, this is Wilbert Smith and his wife. In the early 1950s, he ran the Canadian government UFO program from 1950 to 1954, and he was involved in these balls as well. This is his son talking. I got some audio of his son. The son looks exactly like his father. James Smith just died about 2 years ago, and we did some interviews with him while he was alive, maybe 20 years ago. And he'll actually talk about this ball that they were involved with here in a minute. But here's him talking about hardware, and this is to describe that the Americans were actually sending hardware to Canada, which is part of the story.
Many times I do remember blue military cars pulling up to the house and leaving packages of things for him to do metallurgical analysis on. And we'd asked him what they were, and he said they were chunks of unidentified things that the military had either shot down or found.
Unidentified things, or did he actually use the word flying saucers? Or
yes, on a couple of instances, I remember packages about the size of a loaf of bread coming in. The box would contain a chunk of metal that he'd been told that the Air Force had shot a chunk off of a flying saucer, and they'd already done some analysis of it. And I would like him to have a go at it too. So
now, was this the American Air Force, the Canadian Air Force?
Well, I don't remember what color the plate it was, but I mean, it came from the States, whether it was delivered to the house by a Canadian.
Yeah, so it came from the States. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the pieces that he talks about the fact that they had was a piece that Wilbur Smith talked about, which was from 1952 when the overflight of Washington, D.C. took place. According to Wilbur Smith, this piece that was shot off, and this is a drawing done by Admiral Knowles, who was Wilbur Smith was involved with the Navy. When I asked who his sources were, he said they're Navy people. One of them was Admiral Knowles, and you'll see the Navy gets involved in the ball from 1974, the Betz Ball. The Navy is also involved, but in the 52 they're involved. So Admiral Knowles had this piece that Wilbur Smith said had been shot off a ball that was 2 feet across, and they shot off a piece over Washington, D.C. in this overflight in 1952. And this piece had actually come to Canada along with angel hair, which most people won't even know what angel hair is. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, UFOs would drop this angel hair, which was like spiderweb stuff that would hang from the trees and stuff like that. And people would always try to analyze it, but it would always dissolve before they could actually get it to analyze. And a piece was sent along with this piece from the 1952 site, but of course the angel hair was no longer in the box when they analyzed it. But Wilbur did an analysis on this, and it was sent back, and it was actually recovered strangely by a guy who was working at the CIA. It landed in his yard, and he wrote a book, and he talked about this piece as well, and about the ball. And then he had it in a safe at the CIA, and the thing disappeared from the safe. So this is this 52 story that Admiral Knowles actually talks about, and you can see a drawing here of what the piece that came off looked like. Now here's James Smith talking about the crafts as well.
Buchanan told a story about crash flying saucers, like you mentioned the bodies.
Yeah.
And I believe Buchanan mentioned a story about your father had seen a crash saucer at a Air Force base.
And he confirmed, yes, he had seen it. And they also talked about the bodies. He actually talks about the bodies as well, I think, here.
Did he describe them at all? Do you recall any?
Not that I can recall, except that the descriptions that had sort of been out and about were fairly accurate.
I think there were descriptions of smallish types. I don't know about necessarily the coloring, but
No, I don't remember a lot of those details. I just read that it satisfied my curiosity that he had seen them and that they were real.
The one audio I don't have here, which I'll put in the paper, I talked to James about this thing, about the rumor, and he said yes, it was true that they had Wilbur had seen the bodies and the craft outside a base outside of Washington, D.C., and asked him about the bodies, whether they were grays. He said no, they weren't grays, but they seemed to be like the small people that were being described at the time with UFO sightings. Here she's talking about the monitors. Now we get into the ball thing. So Wilbur Smith had these balls. Now, I think when I'll describe, well, his wife, I'll describe first. This is how it came to me. So I was working on the Charlie Redstar story of this small town in Canada where these UFOs were all over. And my father had someone in his lab. My father was an aviation inspector. He was a pilot for the Canadian government. And one of the people in his office was a guy by the name of Ernie Epp, and he'd had a sighting. And my father said, go talk to Ernie Epp. He's got this sighting he wants to talk about. And I went there, and he's the one that told me about the fact that he in the early 50s, he had worked on this Project Magnet, this Canadian UFO study. And I said, you worked on this study? And he said, yeah, I was just an engineer changing tapes and stuff like that. But yeah, I was involved. And then he said Wilbur Smith was running it. He said, if you really want to know about flying saucers, you should just study what the Canadian government was doing in the 1950s. So I became obsessed with this Wilbur Smith story. Now, Smith died in 62. This is now 1975. And so, of course, I couldn't go to him. But what things that Epa told me was that Wilbur Smith's wife had talked about these small objects that were in the yard. No, he described it different. He said Wilbur was the smartest engineer he'd ever met, but he was totally crazy. He was talking to aliens that were landing in his yard. And I said, they were what? They were landing in his yard. And I go, wow, I got to go to Ottawa. So I bought a ticket. I was a young kid. I bought a ticket. I contacted his wife, Merle Smith, and I said, can I come to Ottawa and talk to you about this? And she said, yeah, sure. So I flew to Ottawa, and she was so impressed with this young guy had come all the way to Ottawa to talk to her. She was just about to retire, and she told me everything. It was just unbelievable the stuff she told me what was going on. And then she put me in contact with a guy by the name of Art Bridge, who lived in Manitoba near me. And he didn't really want to talk. He said the subject had ruined his life. He was a metallurgist for the Defense Department. So he was the guy when they were bringing these little pieces. He was the guy that was looking at these pieces. And I asked him at one point, because Merle Smith said, you've got to talk to this guy. I want you to talk to this guy. He never would have talked to me, but Merle sort of ordered him to talk to me. And when I asked him how much material he'd actually handled, he said tons of it. And he actually, when he saw the MJ-12 document, he actually described to me that he believed they may have actually handled this memory metal material, that they had actually analyzed it. He said it sounded familiar. So anyway, I went to Ottawa, and I said to her, what about this thing, UFOs landing in the backyard Ernie Epp was talking about? And she said, well, it wasn't the saucers landing in the backyard. We had these little tiny things, and they called them monitors. And Art Bridge had brought this up as well. And I played along like I thought I knew what I was talking about, because in 1970, 75, we had the sightings. In 1976, the sightings moved about 11 miles from Carmen, 11 miles east, and they changed from these objects up in the sky, these big objects. There was a few of them, but there wasn't as many as there was in 75. And I would bring people out there to do sighting. They wanted to photograph. And everybody say, I can photograph this thing. I said, okay, bring your cameras. And people would bring these long telephoto lenses, and they were all experts at trying to catch UFOs. And it was very important at that time because it's not like there's no digital cameras at the time. We were using 35 millimeter cameras, and you had to have a tripod. There's no way you could shoot at night without a tripod. Otherwise, you just get streaks all over the place. So these people bring their tripods and stuff like that. And the one night we were sitting there waiting for the big ones to fly by, and suddenly these orange objects started to appear all over the place. And I said to my friend Jim, I said, Jim, what's these orange things? And they look like farm lights, except they were orange. And we stood and watched, and there was a few of them around. And so we picked one and we went down, and there was on what's called mile roads. Now, to make a long story short, this is all in the book Tales of Charlie Redstar. We drove 8.25 miles down. This object always stayed the same distance down the road. It was sitting in the middle of the road, and we couldn't tell how big it was or how far it was. And it seemed to be like a small ball, maybe a couple hundred feet in front of the car. And then we'd move down and half a mile. And the thing always stayed the same distance down the road until it got to a drainage bridge. And I tell this story in Charlie Redstar. We got there, and when we got to the bridge, we could see it was on the bridge. We drove to the bridge, it was gone. Looked under the bridge, stopped the car, looked under the bridge, couldn't see it. Drove down south towards the US border, turned around maybe half a mile down, and this thing was back on the bridge again. But now it's north of us. We went up to the bridge again. This thing was gone off the bridge. And I said, it's got to be under the bridge. It's got to be under the bridge. So we drove north again, down, going back where we had started from. Got about a quarter mile down, and I looked back and I said, Jim, it's back on the bridge again. Let's walk this time. So he had the binoculars. I had a camera, an 8 millimeter camera. And so I took 7 steps, 3 seconds film, 7 steps, 3 seconds film, 7 steps, 3 seconds film. We got closer and closer until I got to the point where I was at a point where I was close enough that I thought if I run right now, I can actually jump and touch this thing. I wanted to touch this thing. I knew that Mikulak had been burned in 1967. I realized this could be very dangerous, but I was like the doubting Thomas. I had to touch this thing. And I said to Jim, I said, Jim, hold the camera. I'm going to run. I'm going to jump on it. And then he said, hang on. There's one coming down the road. There's one, no, there's one sitting on top of the car. I turned around, and I got the binoculars, and I looked, and sure enough, this sort of semicircular orange object was sitting on top of the car, and there was orange smoke hanging down the side of the car. And we started to run. And as soon as I took about 3 steps, I realized, oh no. And I turned around, sure enough, the one at the bridge was gone. So at that point, we knew about the Betz Ball. The Betz Ball had been discovered, and Bob Pratt, who was the National Enquirer reporter, was operating in Canada, and he was going to call Carmen, Manitoba the UFO capital of the world because we just had so many sightings. So I was talking to Bob, and I knew about the Betz Ball because the Betz Ball had been given to the National Enquirer in 75 because they were instead actually it was 74. The ball was given to the National Enquirer because the National Enquirer had $1 million reward for proof of extraterrestrial life. And that would drag in all the best cases. People would report the best cases trying to get money. So the Betz Ball was sent, and according to the research I've done in the last couple of days, there's one podcast called The Oddball. It's a 5-part series on the Betz Ball. It's absolutely the best reporting I've ever heard. And this reporter talks about, female reporter talks about the fact that the Betz Ball had been recovered. And so I knew that this Betz Ball had been there, and we thought for sure the object that we were looking at on this road was like a Betz Ball. It was one of these steel balls about 8 inches across that could fly around, do all sorts of stuff. And the National Enquirer had this thing, and I'm sure they analyzed it because Bob Pratt had told me about the ball, and people are always saying, no, it was just an ordinary thing from Earth. But I remember Bob Pratt. I don't remember what he said, but it was not negative about this thing. It was sort of like this. Yeah, this was very strange. We were not allowed to drill into this thing. There was this stuff on the inside of this thing, and it was kind of a very strange sort of ball. Apparently, at one point, the National Enquirer had a table outside the National Enquirer, and this thing was rolling around on the table. And that demonstration, maybe Bob Pratt had seen. So anyway, the ball was there, and we did all sorts of experiments with this object on the road because it was there all the time. We took infrared photographs, color photographs. We would do things like it would follow the car when you went back down the road. So what we'd do is push this thing down the road with the car. I would jump out, lie in the ditch, and then the car would turn around and it would go back the other way. And we, of course, anticipated that the ball would follow this thing, the car back down the road. And of course, nothing came. So after about 10 minutes, the car came and picked me up again. And we got in the car and started driving the thing. Now the thing followed us down the road. And it was the old idea at the Skinwalker Ranch that this phenomena not only knows what you're doing, it knows what what you're planning to do. So we could never get close. We got close twice. The first night I got close, and then I got close one other time when two of these things collided. And that's in the book. I won't describe that story, but we got close there. I was maybe 3 telephone poles away. I was sitting on the telephone lines above us, maybe 3 telephone poles away. So I got close twice, but so I knew what the Bates ball was. And so when I went to talk to Wilbur Smith's wife, Merle, I asked her about these flying saucers. She said, no, they weren't flying saucers. They were these little monitors. And she said they were in the backyard, and she said they would destroy plants. That she said one of her, an entire row of her beans got burned by this monitor in the backyard. And you'll hear James Smith here talking about the monitors and the next door neighbor. When I talked to her, she said that the neighbors had said, because they knew Wilbur was into UFOs, they said, Wilbur, we don't care where your little friends are from, but could you please tell them to stay out of our trees? So here you heard Jim Smith talking about these monitors that would sit on the windowsill as they were having UFO meetings and would monitor what they were doing.
At our home, when this flying saucer club met in the basement, there were basement windows, and on many occasions there would be small monitor saucers looking in the window, looking at and you're listening to what was going on. In terms of size, they'd be 30, 36 inches across and about a foot thick, rather looking like a jelly donut. I came out of the steps out of the front porch one evening, just after dark, and came down the front steps, and there was one sitting on about 3 feet off the front lawn, where he could look in the window and monitor what was going on. And we sort of stood there and looked at each other for 20 or 30 seconds or so, and then it just took off straight up. And the grass underneath it was virtually completely sterile for the next 10 years. Nothing would grow. There was this great patch of nothing. Similarly, in the trees at the back of the side of the house, again with access to a window, our neighbors used to complain, Smith, keep your saucers in your old trees, because these things would sit up there and virtually burn all of the leaves and branches around them. There'd be a great dead clump, dead hole in the middle of 2 or 3 trees and access to the window. So.
Now, this is an important part because the Bates ball, Terry Matthews, who's in the son of Jerry Bates in her first marriage. So the son, his name was Matthews. Terry Matthews had found this ball, and I've got a video of him describing the ball here in a minute, but it actually destroyed the trees as it came down. And J. Allen Hynek, in his investigation, confirmed that yes, he had seen this tree damage where the ball was recovered. Now, this is the one we had. We called it the little Charlie. We have flashlights at it. This is an infrared photograph and taken in 75. And you'd have to have the frozen film. You'd have the frozen film, and then you'd run as fast as you could, drive 35 miles and then pull the infrared film out and photograph these things. So we'd shoot lights at it, and it would respond to lights. And you can see there's actually 2 of them, and the one would do the tricks, and the other one would sit beside the road. They would be the same, but when you flash the light, the one would flash back at you, do this huge sort of flare, and then we'd photograph, and we'd take rolls and rolls of films and we tried to surround it. We tried all sorts of stuff, and we couldn't get it. So eventually, I just said to people, "Here's where it is. You want to go look at this thing?" And I'm just not interested anymore because I was taking piles of people out there, but you could never do anything with this thing. This is about the best you could do in terms of photographing it. Now here's Jerry Bates with the son with the Bates ball. This was, I think, April of 74 or March 74, they found the ball and they made it public in April of 1974. And according to Jerry, their total life just fell apart. She was a very prominent business person, had actually run for a position at in the federal government as a senator, I think, or something like that, and was very wealthy and had 6 kids and had built a huge business with trucking, then bought a bunch of real estate and actually gave a bunch of real estate for a park there in Florida. 76, as I mentioned, we started to see these things. I got very close the first night. And then in 1977, I got note that there was these balls were appearing in North Dakota, which is the state just south of us. And so I made a contact, and I was actually asked to go down there and lecture. Now the town was a small town. The name is escaping me, but it was north of Bismarck, North Dakota, and it was in the Minot field. So there's 2 different fields, in North Dakota which hold the nuclear weapons, and the Minot field is still active. There's 150 Minuteman missiles in sites spread all over western North Dakota, and that's the Minot field, the Minot Air Force Base. And the Grand Forks field was 150 nuclear missiles on the east side of North Dakota. And the story was that if North Dakota had been a country, it would have been a nuclear superpower. It had 300 nuclear weapons. Anyway, these balls were reported in the Minot field following cars around, and they were describing the same thing. There's like a white ball, seemed to be very close to the car, would be following the cars around. And so I went down there to describe, and I brought my photographs of the Charlie Redstar, small Charlies that we were filming in Canada, and how they would flare up and how many we had, because we had a number of roads where these things seemed to be sitting. And the idea was they would monitor rather than bringing the big craft down. They'd have these little tiny things. They would monitor what was going on from the ground that were a lot less visible. And so I went down there, and I remember it was a small town with like a one store, just a road going through nowhere. And the town hall was so absolutely jammed, people from all over the place, because they were all having problems with these monitors that were following people around around the nuclear missiles in North Dakota. This is one of the articles about the Betz ball, describing its 7.96 inches, which is 8 inches. And that does fit one of the theories that they had, that there was an 8 inch ball. I'll have a picture of it in a minute, from a valve. They call it a valve ball, and it would be used in pulp and paper mills. And there was a pulp and paper mill there that claimed it was one of their balls. But as you'll see, this ball was very, very strange, the Betz ball. Here's the valve, and you can see the ball in the valve there, and they have 8 and 12-inch balls. The problem is that well, it's described as made of stainless steel, and that was one of the things that sort of indicated that the Betz ball couldn't have been from outer space, because it was reportedly stainless steel, and stainless steel is something that's made, and it was they described the actual type of stuff it was used, but the weight would be different. They described the thing as being one type of stainless steel. There's all different types of stainless steel, and the one that they had, if you had taken the calculations, 8 inch ball with half-inch um, depth to it, it would have been 25 pounds, which was 3.5 pounds heavier than what the Betz ball was. And they also describe, when you go to AI, they describe that an 8 inch ball, the half-inch walls are extremely thick for a valve ball. Typically, balls are zero 0.1 to 0.3 inches, and this was half an inch, and within a 1/100th of an inch error. They were very sure it was half-inch depth in this ball, which doesn't fit the type of balls that are used. Now here's hang on, let's see here. Let's see if you can play this. Do this. Oh, I gotta grab it. Here's the video of the son talking about the ball, and this was in a UFO conference there. Oh, I can't copy it. Shoot. And this usually works if you play it. If you just click on it, hey, click on it. We may have to skip that part. No. Okay. Let's go back to the big
Did you hit enter at the end? Maybe if you click on the very end and then hit enter, it'll turn into a clickable link. You know, if you just hit.
Yeah, I've lost it. Anyway, it was a good video because
You
it was
could go backwards at the very, very top beside the save guy. No, up. Yeah, right there. Go back and it'll re-click. Go do it again.
okay.
So now just click at the very end after the 4 or whatever, and then hit enter and see if it turns into a link.
I haven't got the.
I can't.
No. Okay. That was the kid. The kid was describing the ball and what he basically says. I'll just tell you what he says. He's got the ball and he's with the National Enquirer. So they had 5 people. Uh, Sprinkle was one of them. Jan Hynek was another one. And then there was an engineer from UC Berkeley, and he believed that the ball was more extraterrestrial. He really thought, and the other guys were criticizing him. But then the point is, if you're John Hynek, an astronomer, and you're criticizing an engineer about metal, I mean, the engineer is the engineer. He's the top guy. Sprinkle was a psychologist, and they had some other guy he wasn't an engineer. And this engineer guy actually was the guy that believed that there's 3 balls on the inside of it. There was 2 little balls and there was a bigger ball, and the small ones were circular. The big one was not quite circular, and it had a little tiny thing sticking off it that Jerry Bates called an antenna, and this becomes important later on. So these balls, and he said that it was the balls on the inside, based upon the X-ray and the all the tests they did, was heavier than any element known in the periodic table, and he stood by that, and that's why it had this weight. He said most of the weight was from the inside on these balls, and these balls become important when you get down to the real bombshell revelation you're going to see. James Harder was the guy that was the guy who actually was uh, more interested. So Terry Matthews was there, and he describes the fact that he and his brother were flown to the National Enquirer, and this makes sense. The National Enquirer had huge amounts of money; they could pay for anything, and money was no object to these guys. And they'd been flown to the National Enquirer with the ball, and then they had the ball. They'd done demonstrations, and the National Enquirer held the ball, and these kids were sent home. And the ball was actually with the National Enquirer for a period of time. And there was tests with Battelle. Apparently, they'd send it to Battelle and they'd send it to the Navy. That makes sense. The National Enquirer would do that. In my experience, that they would be on it right away. They had all sorts of experts in all sorts of fields that they would send this stuff to. And Battelle is famous for the rumored story that it was the one that handled the memory metal in 1948. They did a number of studies on the memory metal and came up with this nitinol, which is basically a memory metal that you can heat up and then let it cool down, and it'll go back to its normal shape. So Battelle was one of the ones, and then the Navy. And now, as I'm doing explorations, there was all sorts of people that apparently may have handled this ball and did analysis. J.L. Hynek was one of the main ones, and here we get into the whole scandal about J.L. Hynek's involvement in this. He had made statements to people that this was a hoax. He had said it was terrestrial, brought up the stainless steel thing, and yet on the inside, it appeared that he was trying to get a hold of this ball. So Hynek from the National Enquirer UFO panel reached out to Jerry it was misspelled. It's actually G. He wanted them to come to Chicago. So Jerry said, no, you have to come here if you want to see the sphere. So he came, and she said he was just a delightful person. They enjoyed their time together. He was there for only a couple of days. He asked if he could bring the sphere into his bedroom overnight. She didn't see any harm in that. She trusted him. He was a government scientist. So she said that he came with a bag that looked like this, an old doctor's bag. Jerry just wanted to know what it was. That was the whole mission behind this, to find out what this thing was. So he spent the night with the ball, spent the night with it, and then he left the next day. He came, she said, carrying an old kind of doctor's bag. Jerry said that sometime after this, she took the ball. She said the ball stopped rolling around. It stopped doing all this sort of stuff. Like it would, if somebody played a guitar, it would sort of make this vibrating noise, and it would follow people around and move on tables, just go uphill on tables and stuff like that. So Jerry said that sometime after this, she took the ball to be X-rayed again, because the ball had stopped rolling around and vibrating at this point. She felt there was something different about it, and she wanted to be sure. She was really surprised when the X-ray came back. They were different from the Navy ones. Jerry said there was now seams on the sphere. The initial one didn't have any seams. So I went through all the AI. Are the balls put together with seams? And they said, no, you can do it without a seam. It's harder. But she said the first X-ray showed no seam, and then suddenly there was a seam on the sphere on the X-ray. And the original X-ray, there were no seams. That's critically important, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to cut the ball in half. They wanted to, and so it appeared that after she got it back, it stopped working, and it had this seam, as if somebody had cut the ball in half and then put it back together, and then cleaned the outside so you couldn't see the seam. Jerry explained that a lot of people were after the ball. She had to order some guy off her property. Some firm offered her $750,000 for the ball. The Navy X-rays had three little spheres inside. They were perfectly round. The third was bigger and not so round. There was a little line coming off it that she called an antenna. And here's the interesting thing. When the second X-ray came back, she said that the ball that had the antenna on it was now pulverized. I can't prove now that this was the same ball we even had. She was furious. So someone had switched the ball. And this came to this rumored story that Hynek had gone there and he'd switched the ball. He had taken the ball. So we started looking at that, and they went after this, and they actually got Paul Hynek, and he was on an episode of Mysteries and Monsters, and he said, my dad brought back a steel ball from a case in Florida. It was kept in our basement in Evanston. I remember holding it. Heavy, perfectly smooth, no seams. We had no idea what it was. So this reporter did all sorts of investigation, and all the brothers confirmed that this ball was there. And I think they may have said, we used to kick it around. Paul said, we used to kick it around the floor because we didn't know what it was. And then they made the admission when they went to, she's trying to find out who had the ball now. And they said that it had been given to somebody, and that the person that was the contact is now dead, so they wouldn't be able to follow that up. But they even confirmed now that there was actually two of these balls in the Hynek basement. And it couldn't be the actual ball, because the Betz family claims that they still have the ball, but it's being held by a person outside, which seems to indicate that there was a real ball that had these things inside it. And then somehow the Navy or somebody made a second ball, which was transferred to the Betz family when the Navy had it for 2 weeks. They didn't send back the original ball. They sent back a ball that was exactly the same, but it didn't have anything inside it, so it didn't roll around. And then when Hynek went there, the ball had been now cut in half, seamed back together. This is my theory. And then this antenna thing was pulverized, as if they were destroying, maybe it was secret Navy technology, and all they wanted to do is give her the ball back, but destroy the antenna thing so it wouldn't move around anymore. And so that was possibly what Hynek had done. He wasn't stealing the ball. He had the original ball, and he was replacing the fake ball that she had. But neither of the balls now would move around. So she did the X-ray and found out there was two balls. So there's actually definitely two balls. The Betz have a ball, and the Hynek family confirmed that there was two balls in the basement, and they used to kick it around because they didn't know what to do with it. The three sons were talked to, and one remembers there was actually two balls. And this has to do with the type of stuff like the confirmations. The AI says that the sphere was made with 316 stainless steel. And then there's some of the other reports that it was 444 stainless steel. And the report that AI gives is that 316 steel, it was not used for these valve balls. They would use a different type of steel. It would never use that type of steel. So now we get into the other parts of the Hynek story. So this story that Hynek had switched the ball and actually had a ball or two balls in his basement from whatever cases he had. We go to another story about jail and Hynek. The rumor story, and I have to find who said it, was that Hynek had actually still was working for the U.S. Air Force right up until he died. He was still being paid, but somebody said that. I'm trying to track that exact quote who said that. But here's a story that was told by Bill Moore in the story about Paul Benowitz. Everybody knows the Paul Benowitz story, but they don't know those sort of details. They gloss over the real important details. The important detail was that Paul Benowitz said that he was seeing UFOs over the Manzano weapon storage area. He had an access to up on a hill and he could see the storage area. And the key part to that is he was brought in and he had a meeting with generals, and then they started to mess around with him, U.S. Air Force, AFOSI, the intelligence people. But Richard Doty started messing around with him and trying to distract him, whatever. But the thing was, the Manzano weapon storage area was the biggest repository of nuclear weapons in the world. And he was reporting that UFOs were over the nuclear weapons. And of course, they tried to divert him away. But here's the important part. So Bill Moore wrote the book, The Roswell Incident, and he left the UFO field in 1989 after giving a lecture at Las Vegas, where he said that he had been working with the U.S. government. He didn't say for the U.S. government, he was working with the U.S. government, and that he had given stuff to Benowitz to distract Benowitz. And one was called the Aquarius document, and he'd said to Benowitz in an interview that he did in 2004, 2005, these two interviews with that he talked about. And in that interview, he said that I wasn't the only one that was working with the government. He said all sorts of researchers were working with the government as well, reporting on what was happening and stuff like that. And he mentions there was a computer, and everybody knows the story. Paul Benowitz was given a computer that supposedly he was able to talk to the aliens with on this computer, and he would show people these communications he was having with the aliens on this computer. And according to Bill Moore, he said the guy that gave him the computer was J. Allen Hynek. The other story that fits into this comes from my book, Tales of Charlie Redstar. I think I report it in there. The reason I went out was because they got a film of the UFO jumping from the ground up to 5,000 feet in about 3 frames of film. It was 8.25 miles away. The guy that was filming it from the TV studio, actually, when I went to get a copy of it, he said, "No, I'm not going to give you a copy because every time I make copies of this film, it's 12 inches of film." He said, "Every time I do that, it disappears." And I said, "Yeah, come on." And finally, I bugged him, and he said, "Okay, I'll make you a copy." So I got a third generation copy of this film, and of course, mine disappeared when I moved from South Winnipeg. The thing disappeared. It was on a 6-inch metal reel. Anyway, the important story was when he was telling me this story about getting the film and walking out, he said they didn't pay me for it. So when I left the studio, I took the film with me. And he said to me, he said, these people, everybody was coming to him for film and the film was disappearing. These generational copies were disappearing. And he said one of the people that came to him was J. Allen Hynek. And he said, and this is in the book. So this is written like 50 years ago. He said J. Allen Hynek came and he said it was a really strange guy. He wanted the film. So I was telling him about how we had filmed the film and how the people had seen it on the ground. They were on around the film, around the UFO, and it was on an angle. And Hynek, he said, didn't want to know. I don't want to know about it. I just want 2 copies of the film. And the guy said it was very strange. He didn't want to know about the sighting, about what happened. He just wanted the film. And so he got 2 copies of this film and he went back. So I went to the fund for the UFO group that Hynek had started in Chicago. And I said, "Have you got this film?" He got 2 copies of the Charlie Redstar film. And they said, no, we don't have the film here. So again, this is this very bizarre thing. It almost looked like Hynek was working for the UFO community, but he was also gathering material. And there's one other example that I'll put in the paper that I just have to fill out now to make absolutely sure it was Hynek's writing. But I have another story that involves the CIA where Hynek may have been involved on both sides of the fence. So this is an important thing where you get the Betz Ball and you get this bizarre story about Jalen and Hynek's involvement in the Betz Ball. This goes into this thing about orbs have followed helicopters, and somebody else has picked this up, this story up. And at one point, I actually talked to people. This is a picture of a black helicopter. So people will know that experiencers often experience black helicopters hovering over the house, flying over the house. And this film, I'm not sure who it came from. I think it came from a guy in Wisconsin. I'll have to check. And in the paper, I'll detail exactly where this film came from. So he filmed this one, and what you get is can you see it? There you go. Hang on, let's get this thing out of the way. You see in the film, you can actually see um orbs. Now maybe go to the first one. Hang on. Go up here. So you can see the orbs around this thing. Why can I not? There you can see it's right beside the black helicopter. There it is again, two of them around the black helicopter. There's one on top of the black helicopter. There's two in front of the black helicopter. So he's running a film, and these are frames from the film. Now, when I got that one, I got this one from a guy, Tony Bintz. Tony Bintz had come around the world to talk to me, and he wanted to show me these films, and I really didn't want to see. I said I wasn't interested in UFOs, and he starts describing these black helicopters. Now you can see how close this one is. I think he was standing outside a hospital in London, England, having a cigarette, waiting for a test to be done, and this helicopter appears over top of him, and you can see how close this thing is. He had all sorts of helicopters. And he starts filming this. Another one he had. Now you can always identify whether it's a police helicopter or whatever, but it was just these things were very low over London, which was totally legal and made no sense that he would have these helicopters flying him around. And then he shows me this one, and you can see in the back, you can see bottom left-hand corner this orb. And I started looking at black helicopters, and there was quite a few of them. And I actually put on the internet a joke. I said, has anybody, people, all you people trying to film these black helicopters that are around you, has anybody got a black helicopter that doesn't have an orb in it? And you started to see, and somebody else has picked this up as well, that a lot of the photographs that experiencers get of black helicopters always have an orb in the photograph as well. And here's the one that Desta will know about. This was the bizarre thing where the intelligence took my PowerPoint presentation in Laughlin, Nevada, and absolutely messed it up. They doubled slides, tripled slides, pulled slides apart. It was the most bizarre thing. I had to take 50 slides out of this thing that were all messed up. And that's totally impossible to take the thing. And this is one of the ones was the Tony Bintz photograph where in the presentation they'd taken the slide and they'd put it sideways. And anybody who knows PowerPoint knows that there's no way once you lock it in and ready for presentation, there's no way anybody can flip the slides around. But somehow they'd put this slide sideways with the helicopter and the orb. And this is the other one that Tony Bintz had, which was you can see the helicopter on the bottom, and on the top is this massive object that's above the helicopter. So anybody who's got can put in the comments. Anybody who's an experiencer who has done black helicopters can give us the photographs or show the photographs because I've got a collection of them, and it's an incredibly important thing. And so put it in the comments, and also make sure that you subscribe because Desta wants to get to 2 million subscribers by the end of the year. Now you have UFOs chasing helicopters, and I've got planes. This will be all in the paper. I have planes, helicopters. But the other thing is, I've always heard these stories with experiencers where they see a UFO, and all of a sudden these jets are chasing the UFO, and it's very, very common. And the thing is, well, how does the Air Force or whatever know to be that close to it when the UFO appears? And it's almost like it's, for example, Lakatsky, the guy that ran OSAP, actually has now come out and said publicly that they've proved that men in black actually exist. And he said, the important thing is, what are they doing? Are they trying to scare you away, or are they trying to draw you in? And this is this whole thing that people get drawn in by this thing. And it's almost like it's a show that the UFO is the helicopter and it's also the plane. And that this is just a show that to make people interested and get them awe and curiosity. And then I realized that I had been with Angela Joyner. We were going to do a book together. She was going to ghostwrite a book for me on the presidents. And I was at her place, and her husband comes home from work at the university, and he says, "Okay, come on, come outside. This is UFO in the sky." And it was clear day, no clouds, nothing, and this UFO. And I don't remember. Angela and her husband both died of COVID within a day of each other. And I wish she was still around so I could ask her, what did it actually look like, Angela? Because it didn't look like a balloon. It didn't look like a plane. It was very strange, and it was fairly close, but it was kind of like it was flying along, and it's sort of flying off. I goes, that's pretty interesting. So the three of us are standing there watching this thing fly off, and all of a sudden, shit, this jet comes flying by the same trail, and it's chasing after this ball. And I didn't realize this until I did this presentation, that I actually had this experience. And I go, hey, look, it's chasing it. And then all of a sudden, another jet comes flying by, and it's going in the same direction again. And then the jets disappeared, and then we went in the house, and that was the end of the story. But you hear these stories all the time, and then I realized I had actually been involved in one of these things. Now, here's where we get into some more interesting stuff. So Chris Bledsoe, I'm good friends with Chris Bledsoe. I had the experience with the dog. Anybody knows that story? That whenever they do the movie or the documentary, this story with the dog will be in there. But I got to know him fairly well, and I actually was present when he healed a woman who was deaf in Maine. I was with him when he healed this woman. So he's a very interesting character. His story was actually briefed to President Obama by Tim Taylor and at Camp David, and brought back the napkin to prove to Chris that he had actually been with the president. He films orbs. So here's one of his orbs. He films lots of orbs, and he says it's all about orbs. And that's what you'll see in the UFO field now, is it actually now turned from flying saucers into orbs. Everybody's seeing these orb things. So he had them, and what he had started to appear, not metal orbs like the baseball. His balls were these little glass balls. And I was friends with him, and I'm honored to have gotten one of these balls. I asked him at one point, how many of these things did you actually find? In the end, he said, well, over 40. And people will say, well, these are just marbles. Well, I played with marbles when I was a kid, and marbles always had this colored thing inside of it, and very clear marbles. I don't remember clear marbles. And the other thing is that if you say these are marbles, well, explain that they're all different sizes. None of these are the same size. They're all different sizes of marbles. And these are some of the marbles he had found in his yard. And he just kept finding more and more of these marbles. And the other thing was the tree. And this gets back to the Bates ball. So you remember that Terry Bates said the trees had been injured. Well, the number one tree, and this is Chris with this mist that appears before the orb appears. So I've done presentations on orbs that you can find where I'm talking about the orbs and this mist. I'll ask people, you had orbs? Do you have mist? Do you have this mist appear? And oh yeah, I got that stuff. And I ever thought it was smoke or whatever. So you have this mist appear, and then the orb appears. And this is what's called the burning tree. This is a tree that burned 3 times in 12 hours. And the thing that fits into the baseball thing was that there was I'll put it in the paper. There was a circle that appeared under the tree, like a burn mark of a circle. I think it was 17 feet across or whatever. And it burnt the grass out underneath the tree. And then the tree burned, but the tree fell apart. It was a 150-foot tree, and the top half of it all died. It just died, and all the branches fell off. And when the tree was on fire, it was coming out the top of the tree through the branches out the top of the tree. It was the most bizarre thing, but all sorts of stuff that happens around Chris Bledsoe. But this is called the burning tree, and it was damaged. And you see here's photograph of an orb and it's flying through the tree here. And the other one was Chris Bledsoe tells the story when he came back the first night after encountering these things at the Cape Fear River. He got there, and he heard the dogs all barking. His father had a kennel full of hunting dogs, and they were all barking. And he went out, and they were all faced to the back of the kennel. So he said, someone's trying to break into my father's garage. And he took the dog, his dog, and he said to him, go. And he kicked the dog, and the dog went through the bush. And he knew there was a trail through the bush. The dog would go through the bush, and he went racing around the other side of the bush on his property, and he knew where the dog was going to come out. And he put his hand against this tree, and he was standing there, and he was sort of catching his breath. And that's when he looked up, and this alien that was 3 feet high, that looked like it was the color of the moon. It looked like it was encased in glass, and it was shiny. And he said, "Okay, you got me." He said he was close enough that he could reach out and touch this thing. It was sitting there and it had the big red eyes. And he said he put his hand there, and then he said he heard the dog coming, and as the dog came, the alien just disappeared. This tree completely died. It was an oak tree, and all the branches fell off it. And it was, and this is this whole thing about the trees being burnt and broken. So you have exactly the same thing with the Betz ball and Chris Bledsoe's thing, where this oak tree died in the backyard. Here it is again. You can see all the branches are falling off this thing. It completely died. Now here's another one that when we started to research this story, we found out there's another ball. It was held by a producer. Now we don't know what this ball is, and it was the same thing. It would do all these strange things, roll around, whatever. And it was held by a producer who worked with Willie Nelson in Texas. And who was trying to get it? Someone was trying to get control to X-ray the ball. And when he went, they said, "Oh, too late. Brandon Fugel has the ball." So here's another bombshell that Brandon Fugel has one of these balls, and he's investigating it. These bizarre balls that supposedly roll around and do strange things. And at Skinwalker Ranch, you'll see they were all very impressed when they got this ball. They're filling orbs. Here's a photograph of them with a ball at Skinwalker Ranch from the History Channel show, where they are all excited about orbs. But orbs is an old story. It goes back. We used to call them ground lights. We didn't even call them the orbs. Didn't even exist at that time. We called them ground lights. Here's another one, and I think this is the last slide. We're starting to review, and anybody who has another ball story, please send it to us, because we'll put it in the paper, we'll research it. But there's another ball in China that has been photographed. So that's it, and we'll go off here. And if you got any questions, Desta, we'll take the questions. Otherwise, we'll just call it a day. It's almost like a rabbit hole, that once you start down this thing, you start to realize, oh, there's another ball. And I think you've got other balls. You described a couple other balls that you have discovered in the literature that we're going to track down.
The Kara ball is the Japanese one that I'm writing a little tiny bit about, but I can add that next time. But it was the same thing, it wasn't an actual sphere. They are calling it the Kara sphere, but when I looked at it, it kind of actually looks like a little UFO, a little silver. Did you see it?
No.
It's very tiny, but it's like a round ball on the top with like a saucer kind of on the bottom. So it was flying around in like 1972. I don't have all the facts here, but I think the town was called Kara, Japan, and it was I'm looking into that. I thought it was a sphere, so I started looking into it, but it's actually, I don't think it's a sphere. It's just a little round metal object, and that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. But we may eventually probably we're going to do a book on all these spheres, because when we started looking, there was quite a bit of them, and some of them looked like, yeah, they may be earthly, but the thing with the ball, with the Betz ball, which got the most attention, was the fact that it had this different X-ray, where one X-ray showed one thing, one showed the other, which indicated that somebody had done something, that the Navy, because the other story she told was that when the Navy returned the ball, she said, you can have the ball for analysis, but if it's not Navy, you have to return it to me in 2 weeks. And because she was a business person, she had this contract with them that they'd bring it back. And when the guy brought the ball back, suddenly she got a call from the Navy, and she said he came in, and she said, the Navy has called you. And then he says, he was on the phone, and he went, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As if he was getting instructions on something. And then he said to Jerry Bates, he said, we'd like to keep the ball. I want to take the ball back. I'm taking the ball back. He says, no, you're not taking the ball back. It's my ball. Put it down. And he had to leave. So this is this whole thing that the Navy had a great interest. And the other thing was, if it was just a thing from a pump station, why would J. Allen Hynek be so interested in this ball? So there's all this intention, and it does make sense that if it's stainless steel, the aliens wouldn't make it out of stainless steel. So that's where I started to think maybe it was U.S. Navy intelligence that they had. They were using it in the ocean or whatever, whatever, it had the antenna, and all they wanted to do was destroy it so it wouldn't, they give it the ball back, but destroy this little antenna thing so it wouldn't do anything anymore. But we'll keep working on it. I'm going to get a hold of these reporters. Anybody who wants to watch the podcast, it's a 5-part episode, and it's probably runs for about 4 hours. It's called the Oddball podcast. It's 5 episodes, and it's absolutely unbelievable stuff that she came up with. I think she spent 2 years working on the baseball story, and actually got in contact with Jerry at the very end, and was trying to get her to talk, and Jerry just simply will not talk to anybody about the ball anymore. And she said, maybe in a year, call me in a year, and maybe I'll talk to you. And that's how the episode ends. So I'm going to contact the reporter and see whether she did get anything or anything else that she found out, because she was doing the same thing as me. As she went along, she found more and more stuff that was very interesting that fit into the story. So we'll leave it at that. And if anybody's got any comments or any balls, or especially these photographs, because I can guarantee there's going to be a lot of these photographs of black helicopters, and they always have an orb in it. And that is something you need to explain. How do you get an orb and a black helicopter in the same photograph? So I'll leave it for that. Thanks for listening. And thanks for listening, because I'm sure you've got a lot of valuable things to do. And I'm always impressed that people will be attentive enough to listen to me yap for an hour or 45 minutes. And so I really appreciate it. And let's do this subscription so Desta can get to 2 million subscribers.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Grant.
Have a good day.